At 3:17 p.m., officers forced their way into Emily Carter's house. Nothing looked wrong. The dishes were clean. The bed was made. Her car was still in the driveway. Her wallet sat on the kitchen counter. Her phone was charging beside it. But Emily Carter was gone. At first, detectives assumed it was voluntary. A woman in her 30s. No signs of violence. No sign of a struggle. No evidence anyone had entered the home. Then investigators discovered something strange. Emily had left behind everything she used every day. Except two things. Her passport. And a small black notebook. A notebook nobody knew existed. That discovery transformed a routine missing person case into something much darker. Because the more detectives learned about Emily Carter, the more they realized she had been preparing for this moment for years. Maybe decades. And before this investigation was over, it would lead them to a secret that had been buried for 22 years. Stay with me. Because what detectives eventually found would force them to completely rethink who Emily Carter really was. Detective Sarah Hayes was assigned to the case on the third day. She had worked missing person investigations for 11 years. Long enough to recognize patterns. Long enough to know when something felt wrong. The Carter residence felt wrong immediately. Not because it looked dangerous. Because it looked intentional. Nothing had been disturbed. No overturned furniture. No broken locks. No signs of panic. Whoever left this house had walked out calmly. And they had expected not to come back. Hayes reviewed security footage from neighboring homes. At exactly 11:42 p.m., Emily appeared on camera. Alone. Calm. Wearing a dark jacket. No luggage. No backpack. No visible concern. She walked to the end of the street. Turned left. And disappeared. No cameras captured her after that. No ride-share records. No credit card activity. No phone signal. Nothing. It was as if Emily Carter had simply stepped out of existence. For several days investigators found no meaningful leads. Then Hayes discovered something buried inside Emily's financial records. A payment. Small. Ordinary. Easy to overlook. 2 days before her disappearance, Emily had rented a storage unit. Paid in advance for 12 months. As if she already knew she wouldn't be around to renew it. The warrant was approved on a Friday morning. Detective Hayes expected hidden money. Maybe evidence of blackmail. Maybe signs of a kidnapping. What she found was something entirely different. The door rolled open. And Hayes stopped walking. Every wall was covered. Photographs. Maps. Documents. Hundreds of newspaper clippings. Handwritten notes. Names connected by colored strings. Addresses. Phone numbers. Court filings. Witness statements. It looked less like a storage unit and more like the headquarters of a private investigator. Or someone obsessed. Someone who had spent years pursuing a single question. At the center of the far wall hung one photograph. A smiling little girl standing in a garden. Beside her stood a woman with dark hair and warm eyes. Emily Carter. And her mother. Pinned beside the photograph was a handwritten note. Large block letters. Only 5 words. They lied about what happened to her. Hayes read it twice. Then a third time. Because suddenly the mystery wasn't where Emily had gone. The mystery was what she had discovered. And why she believed someone had lied for more than 2 decades. As investigators searched deeper into the unit, they uncovered dozens of notebooks. Records stretching back 22 years. The same number that kept appearing again and again. 22 years. 22 years since Catherine Carter disappeared. 22 years since Emily's life changed forever. Emily Carter was 12 years old when she came home from school one Tuesday afternoon. The front door was slightly open. The television was off. The house was silent. On the kitchen counter sat a cold cup of tea. Half finished. Her mother's purse was still hanging where it always hung. But Catherine Carter was gone. No note. No goodbye. No explanation. Police searched. Friends were questioned. Leads dried up. Months became years. Years became decades. Eventually the official assumption settled into place. Catherine Carter had left voluntarily. Case closed. Everyone moved on. Everyone except Emily. Every birthday she wondered where her mother was. Every Christmas she checked the mailbox. Every year she promised herself she would stop looking. Every year she failed. The quiet librarian people thought they knew wasn't actually living an ordinary life. Behind the scenes, Emily was conducting an investigation. A 22-year investigation. She tracked witnesses. Collected records. Saved articles. Cross-referenced names. Built timelines. Followed dead ends. Then followed new ones. The storage unit was proof. Emily hadn't spent 22 years grieving. She had spent 22 years working. And then something happened that changed everything. A billionaire died. The lawyer's name was Gerald Marsh. His call came on a Monday morning. He informed Emily that Richard Voss had passed away. Richard Voss was a billionaire businessman. A powerful man. A connected man. And according to the will, Emily Carter had inherited nearly his entire estate. $50 million. Marsh expected shock. Tears. Silence. Instead, Emily asked a single question. When did he die? The lawyer later admitted the question unsettled him. Because it wasn't the reaction of someone receiving life-changing money. It sounded more like someone checking a date. Verifying a detail. After ending the call, Emily wrote something inside her notebook. Then went back to work. Within days the inheritance became public. Reporters appeared outside her home. Relatives emerged from nowhere. Old acquaintances suddenly remembered her existence. Emily ignored all of them. Because while everyone else saw money, Emily saw opportunity. $50 million could buy something she had never been able to afford before. Access. Private investigators. Legal specialists. Archived records. Sealed documents. Doors that had remained locked for 22 years suddenly opened. And behind one of those doors was a name. Arthur Pelham. Arthur Pelham had once worked directly under Richard Voss. For years Emily tried to speak with him. For years he refused. But this time was different. This time she arrived with evidence. Lawyers. Investigators. Documents he could no longer ignore. Eventually Arthur agreed to meet. The conversation lasted nearly 4 hours. What he revealed changed everything. Years earlier, Richard Voss's company had become involved in a questionable government contract scandal. Documents had been altered. Records had disappeared. Questions had been buried. Catherine Carter worked inside the company during that period. At first she knew nothing. Then she began noticing inconsistencies. Then she started asking questions. According to Arthur, that was the moment everything changed. He didn't know exactly what happened afterward. But he knew Catherine became a problem. And powerful people rarely tolerate problems. When the interview ended, Arthur said something that immediately caught Emily's attention. "There's one place you should look." Emily leaned forward. Arthur gave her a name. Marin's Cove. A small coastal town few people had ever heard of. 3 days later Arthur Pelham disappeared. And that same night, Emily Carter walked out of her house at 11:42 p.m. If you're enjoying the investigation so far, subscribe. The final pieces of this case are where everything changes. Detective Hayes found the name Marin's Cove inside Emily's notes shortly after Arthur vanished. The town was small, remote, easy to overlook. Population under 2,000. 4 hours from the city where Catherine Carter had disappeared 22 years earlier. Investigators moved quickly. For the first time, the case felt alive. For the first time, they had a destination. When officers arrived, they followed a gravel road leading to a modest white house near the shoreline. Curtains closed. Front porch empty. Silence. One officer knocked. Nothing. Then the door slowly opened. And a woman appeared. Mid-50s. Dark hair streaked with gray. Warm eyes. The room went silent. Because every detective present recognized her immediately. They had been staring at her photograph for weeks. Catherine Carter was standing in the doorway. Alive. But the greatest surprise was still waiting inside. Because Catherine wasn't alone. Emily was already there. She had arrived hours before the detectives. She had found her mother first. When Detective Hayes entered the living room, Emily looked up. And smiled. Not with relief. Not with excitement. With the calm certainty of someone who had spent 22 years moving toward a single destination. And had finally arrived. For hours Catherine told her story. She had never abandoned her daughter. 22 years earlier she had been threatened by individuals connected to powerful interests surrounding the scandal. The message had been simple. Disappear quietly. Or risk losing your daughter too. Catherine chose exile. She was relocated. Watched. Controlled. Given just enough money to survive. Never enough freedom to leave. Every day she thought about Emily. Every year she wondered whether her daughter still remembered her. She never imagined Emily had spent 22 years searching. But Emily had never stopped. Not once. Back at the storage unit, investigators discovered one final item. A sealed letter. Addressed to Emily. Written by Richard Voss. Inside, Voss admitted he knew pieces of what had happened to Catherine Carter. Not everything. But enough. Enough to act. Enough to help. And enough to know he had done neither. The inheritance, he wrote, was never intended as a gift. It was an apology. A final attempt to correct the greatest failure of his life. His final sentence read. I couldn't give you your mother back. But I could give you everything you needed to find her yourself. Detective Hayes closed the case file on a Thursday afternoon. Officially, the conclusion was simple. Missing person, found. But years later, when asked about the case, Hayes always remembered one thing: the world had looked at Emily Carter and seen a quiet librarian driving an old car. A woman living an ordinary life. They were wrong. Emily Carter had spent 22 years pursuing the truth with a level of determination most people could barely imagine. She was never waiting to be rescued. She was building a path. One clue at a time. 1 year at a time. One sacrifice at a time. And when the opportunity finally arrived, she was ready. Because sometimes the difference between giving up and finding the truth isn't courage. It's time. And sometimes the people everyone underestimates are the ones who change the ending. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who loves mysteries that go deeper than they first appear. And tell me in the comments. At what point did you realize Catherine might still be alive? Subscribe for more stories where the truth is always more complicated than the headlines.